Hello, everybody. Welcome to sunny Fort Stockton, Texas. Well, not so sunny. Actually, some clouds are moving in, but the weather's beautiful here on this Christmas day, and I'm stuck in a van and stories you don't want to hear about. So let me give you a lesson today about intervals, as the title suggests, intervals. How will this help you? Well, it's how I claim that I know, where any interval is on my guitar fretboard, and when you hear people talk about certain things with music, oftentimes intervals come up. You'll hear the flat fifth, or they're talking about the thirds, or they're talking about a perfect fourth, and you want to know where that is on your fretboard. This is a way to get that visualized. So here we go. For those who don't get intervals at all, I'll try to help you out here. Here we have an example of, and you're going to have to forgive this format of lesson I'm giving here. My camera's moving, the paper's moving, it's just awful. You're going to have a really headache view of my, and I just really apologize for this format, but it's the best I can do for you. So anyways, we've got, what I drew here was all the intervals, root, you can call that a flat or a minor. Flat, I'm going to use flat 2, major 2, flat third, regular third, your fourth, your flat fifth, sharp fifth, sixth, seventh, and seventh. A couple things that confuse the newbies, the fact that there's 3 5s and everything else has 2 except the 6 has 1. In some instances, the 6 is called a flat 6, but the 5 is so strong that it basically has sisters left and right. Sorry about the focus. I don't know what's going on with this camera. It's deciding to go focus crazy, probably because my finger's in the picture. So let me use a pen instead. So the 5 is so strong in music that it has basically has a sharp, the interval before and the interval after it are referenced to itself. I didn't show to make this video quicker, I didn't show the flat 2 or the major 2 because, well, that's obvious. It's always after your root note. It's the very next note. This is going to make, you can hear the sound yourself by, fretting those 2 notes together and hearing the Jaws theme, or, hearing the first notes of, like, Here Comes the Bride or whatever by playing these 2 notes together. So not a big deal there. We'll start with the flat third, the major third, and we'll go on. I show you here that all 12 notes are represented. I put 1 through 12 in those squares, so this is all the intervals that there are. And I referenced a piano keyboard, how it would look from the key of C. So you'd have a white key, and that's why the C uses all the whole notes, because well, let's not go with a because, but anyways, it corresponds to all the whole numbers. Here, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, and all the black keys are that, but it doesn't have to be that. It's just an interesting reference. It's kind of confusing some people, but for some people it does help, so whatever. Let's get on with the show here. Flat third, our first interval after the seconds, is the flat third, the minor third. Now, these are some of your most important, for those who are really new to all this. This is what's making your happy and you're sad. When you have a flat third, it's where you hear your minor, making a minor chord, and a major chord. This is the implicator right here, the third. It's very important to know your thirds. And here's how they are. Whenever you have this R, means whatever note you're on your guitar. So if you're on a note, you finger a note, the third is always going to be there, the flat third. It never changes. It's always the string down and 1 fret over. So there would be your root and your third. You can kind of, if you do like a minor C chord, I think, you'll see that that's the first 2 notes. But anyways, what I've done here is done the basic interval pattern, and then here I've put down some other ways to know that interval. There's a jazz chord that's commonly played where I sometimes drape my thumb over on the low E string, and then I play these 2, just bar them with 1 finger, and you play these and these 3 notes, and not this note and not that note, and you've got a minor chord. This is a 7th and this is a 5th, so you've got a minor 7th chord, root 3 5 7. But we're not dealing with that today. I'm just showing you where the third is, and the third is always the middle note there. That's a minor third. And you'll recognize that chord as the minor 7th chord. So there you go. There's your third there, and the third is always there. So like for example, also in this particular instance, we'd have a flat third right there. Excuse me. Major third. Let's move on here. Major third makes this pattern on your guitar fretboard, and always this pattern. Think of the very top of a G major chord in the cage system from the 6-string root. Well, there you go. The first two are your root and your major third, your happy G chord. And in this jazz style chord, well, the major third is always the next one up from the minor third, so it stands to reason that if the minor third was here, the major third is going to be there. I put these two notes in there as optional because sometimes you'll see a chord that's shaped like this as a dominant 7th because it's got the flat 7th in there, but that's a little more than we're talking about right now. And then a major 7th chord is going to have the major 7th here, and it's going to go with the major third and the 5th. Here I put it down here, but it doesn't. You wouldn't really normally put a major 7th with a flat third. It's not very common. It's not that you can't. You can do anything in music, but it's just not very common and not ultimately very musical. Okay, so the 4th. Where is a 4th? Let's move on from the thirds and get to the 4th. Well, a 4th is always straight down from your root. Wherever you fingered a note on your fretboard, the note directly below it is always a 4th. Here's the thing I like about intervals in the guitar fretboard. They don't move around like some ideas can get, like, sometimes here, sometimes there. Intervals always stay the same. So, like on a piano, the intervals will stay the same, so to speak. So, now, above your root, if you were, let's say you were on the A string here, so the E string was still available. If you went back like a power chord, that could be that's also the 4th. It's the same note, but once you go lower, that suddenly kind of to people's ear becomes the root, and then that would be a 5th. So I just put it in parentheses there as like it's there too, but you're generally thinking of a 4th straight down below. So not only is a 4th just down below, so we'll write that right here too, but also when it comes to fingering a bar chord, if you move, instead of taking any of these thirds, which of course the thirds are just before the 4th, 3, 3, 4, minor third, major third, 4, as you can see, root, minor third, root, major third, so minor third, major third, 4th, that makes your chord a suspended chord. When you take all the happy or sad out of it and leave people in suspense of what that chord might be, you've got a suspended chord with your 4 there. Oh, you can use that 2 as a suspended 2, but we're going to just leave that out of our discussion today. Here is the flatted 5th. Now, flatted 5th gets some interesting geometry going here. It's always this to this right here. That's your tritone. Whenever you hear someone mentioning the tritone, the 7th and the 3rd of in jazz, a lot this comes up, and it's also in that dominant 7th chord, which is right here. There's a tritone interval in that chord. If you had all these notes happening, the interval between this one and this one is a flat 5th, a tritone. It's a very tough interval to hear on its own, and it's going to be up to you to put it into your own musical vocabulary, more than we can talk about here. Here's some interesting geometry about it. It goes not only root 5th, but it look here closely, it repeats root 5th, then it's root 5th again, and root 5th again. The only way it doesn't form an exact diagonal up the fretboard is we all know that the B and the E string shift over here. So, as a side note, if you go up from the root straight to the flat 5th, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, flat 5th, you've got flat 5th root, flat 5th root, flat 5th root. Once again, the same exact structure there. And I believe if you play all these like that, you've got some kind of half diminished chord, or half some type of scale. You can play it scalar like that, but yeah, just I mean, you'd be playing the same notes there and there, so whatever. Just some kind of interesting geometry there to check out. So let's go for our final intervals here. Let me get another page going here. All right, our regular fifth, our strongest interval in music. Let me get this thing on the clipboard here so it stops moving around so much. Sorry about all that. Okay, the interval of a fifth, it's directly above a root. But once again, once you go above a root, lower in the lower strings, it's kind of hard to say that that's the not now the new root. So anyways, consider it the power chord interval is what we'll call it. Hopefully you know what a power chord is. I think any beginner guitarist, especially electric, learns a power chord first. So root fifth is your strongest interval. Play it on a piano, play it on a guitar. You can hear both together, ring in unison very nicely. And it comes up a lot with chords. You know, you're always going to your fifth chord. The fifth returns to the root, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot to do with the fifth. It's great to know where this interval is. So, root, and here it is in a bar chord shape from the 6-string root. It's here, and then you would have another root. And then here you have your thirds. You can pick one or the other for a sad chord or a happy chord. And then once again, you have a 5 and a root. Root, 5, root, 5, root. Look at that. And that was just a mistake there. So the root is always there as basically, and pretty common one for everyone to already know. So let's move on. The sharp fifth, not used so much in music, so it comes up from time to time. So you can just write it out on a piece of paper here so you can know it's always one up from the fifth. And it's probably a little closer, maybe back this way. And it's also down there on your B string. If your root was on the 6th string, you can consider it one over on the B string. And the same as if your root was on the A string, it would be down there on the E string. So moving on there, I don't know it makes a cool sounding chord, I can tell you that much. But when you play a sharp fifth, it's neat that it's a neat chord when you consider it from its root. But it's actually just an inversion of a more normal chord. So consider that and we'll move on. A 6, which is a lot like a 13th, is here, root. You can go above on a lower string and find it right there. You can go down and find it right there. You can find it a little closer right there. And once again, it's not very common. When you go way up here or way up here, it's probably more common to think of the 6th as a chord extension, which is also known as a 13th. So when someone starts talking to you about a 13th, then you can start thinking about this chord here. I think that's right. Is that a 13th? Yeah. Moving on from there, the 7ths are down here, and I just put them. We did just to save time on the lesson. Put them both together because they're right next to each other. Just like the 2s are on the other side of the root, well, your 7ths are on the other side. Your major 7th is really always trying to resolve to a root, is played in a single note in like a solo or in any line. As a chord, it's the diminished chord. It comes up also in the in 7th chords. You want to know where your 7th is for chords. Pretty much anytime you have a root, it's one string down, the next string. Also consider like this would be E, skip the A on the D string, on the fret right in the same fret, you're going to have your flatted 7th, and then you're going to have your major 7th right up there. Going back to this chord we showed you earlier, if you wanted major chord, the dominant is going to be using the flat 7th, and a regular major chord, major 7th, is going to use the regular 7th. So you're basically choosing from one of these 7ths. So you have a little damage to my, in case you thought I had some food stuck on my thumb there, I have a little growing out, some little smash to my thumb that's growing out. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this lesson on seventh, or not seventh course, but intervals here, and it made some sense to you, helped you out. Take a pause, and I'll try to hold that steady as I can so you can get something to copy there down into your notes, and you can master your intervals. Next lesson coming up, I think I'm going to try to... I've always avoided telling you about this next thing because it's kind of like the most advanced thing that I've ever found with my graph paper method here. But I guess I'm going to go for it, and we'll see how it goes. It's about the basic core structure of your fretboard, the kernel of intervals, but it'll include a master code for modal modulation and what it will mean to modulate to a key that's close by or far away. And I'll show you how there's a pattern involved, and it's pretty easy to know, and you can have like a deep jazz knowledge with pretty much nothing. Well, you got to take, it's always hard to describe things. When I say deep jazz knowledge, you're not going to learn jazz like, Jens Larson or something like that, but you're going to have a deep insight into something that not a whole lot of people have an easy time with. Just a little something, a way to go from key to change keys and to know kind of like a composer's code. So before I ramble on and make this longer than it needs to be, let me let you guys go, and we'll see you next lesson. Let me know how interested you are in seeing all that stuff in the next lesson, and how much you like this one. Smash that like button like everybody says, and think about subscribing, and tell a friend so we can get over that 700 subscriber hurdle, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Brought to you by Chevy.